The rain fell in sheets across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, turning Seoul into a blur of neon and shadow. Kayamaka stood motionless in the doorway of the master bedroom, her hands still on the cold brass handle. The silk dress she wore, the one he had chosen for her, clung to her skin like a second lie. On the bed, tangled in sheets that still smelled of her perfume, her husband lay beside another woman. His eyes found hers first. And in them, she saw no shock. No guilt. Only the flat, patient gaze of a man who had been waiting for her to discover what he had stopped hiding. The woman stirred. Kayamaka did not blink. Stay with me, because this story will not let you go. Like, share and subscribe, and comment I stayed so I know my real ones are watching. Kayamaka's fingers released the door handle with the quiet precision of someone who had learned, long ago, that survival meant controlling even the smallest gestures. She did not scream. She did not cry. She turned and walked down the hallway of the penthouse she had called home for 3 years, her heels clicking against marble floors that had witnessed 1,000 silences between her and the man she had married. Behind her, she heard movement. The rustle of sheets. A woman's confused murmur. And then his voice. Kayamaka. Kong Si-woo's voice was low, unhurried, as though he were calling her back to discuss a business matter rather than the ruins of their marriage. She did not stop. The elevator doors closed before he could reach her. Kayamaka pressed her back against the mirrored wall and stared at her reflection. 29 years old. Sharp cheekbones inherited from her mother. Eyes that had seen too much before she ever left Lagos. A body draped in designer silk, purchased with money she had never asked for and never wanted. The woman staring back at her looked composed. Inside, something was cracking. The elevator descended 47 floors. By the time it reached the lobby, she had rebuilt the wall around her heart, brick by brick. She would not give him the satisfaction of her tears. 3 years earlier, she had arrived in Seoul with a single suitcase and a law degree from the University of Lagos. She had come for opportunity, not love. She had found both. Or so she had believed. Kong Si-woo had not pursued her the way other men did, with flowers and flattery and promises that meant nothing. He had watched her. Studied her. Waited until she was drowning in visa complications and workplace prejudice, and then he had appeared like a life raft disguised as a predator. Marry me, he had said, as though proposing a merger rather than a marriage. And every door in this city will open for you. She should have asked why. She should have wondered what a man like him, heir to a construction empire that everyone whispered was built on blood, wanted with a Nigerian woman who had nothing but her pride and her intelligence. But she had been desperate. And he had been patient. The lobby of the Kong Tower was deserted at this hour. Kayamaka walked past the security desk, ignoring the guard's startled bow. Outside, rain soaked through her silk dress within seconds. She did not care. The cold felt cleaner than anything she had touched in months. A black car idled at the curb. The rear window rolled down. Get in. She recognized the voice before she saw the face. Park Jun-ho, Si-woo's most trusted lieutenant. The man who had never once looked at her with anything but quiet suspicion. I'm not going back, she said. I'm not taking you back. Jun-ho's face was unreadable in the shadows. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Before he decides what to do with you. The words landed like a threat wrapped in silk. Kayamaka understood, with sudden horrible clarity, that leaving Kong Si-woo would not be as simple as walking out the door. She got in the car. What choice did she have? The streets of Gangnam blurred past the tinted windows as Jun-ho drove in silence. Kayamaka studied his profile, the sharp jaw, the scar that ran from his ear to his collar, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with the controlled tension of a man who had done violence and would do it again. Where are you taking me? She finally asked. A safe house. One the chairman doesn't know about. The chairman. She let out a bitter laugh. You mean my husband? Jun-ho's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. I mean the head of the Kong Syndicate, he said quietly. The man you married without understanding what he truly is. The safe house was a modest apartment in a neighborhood Kayamaka had never visited, far from the gleaming towers and designer boutiques of her gilded cage. Jun-ho unlocked the door and stepped aside to let her enter. There's food in the refrigerator. Clean clothes in the bedroom. Stay here until I contact you. Kayamaka turned to face him. Why are you helping me? For a long moment, he did not answer. His gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted again, and in his eyes she saw something she had not expected. Guilt. Because I should have warned you 3 years ago, he said. And I didn't. The door closed behind him. Kayamaka stood alone in the silence, dripping rainwater onto a stranger's floor, and finally allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had lost. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the narrow bed and replayed every moment of her marriage, searching for the signs she had missed. The late-night meetings Si-woo never explained. The men who bowed too deeply when he entered a room. The way his eyes went cold whenever she asked about his business. She had told herself it was cultural differences. Language barriers. The natural distance between two people who had married for convenience rather than love. But she had felt something for him. That was the part that burned. Somewhere between the arrangement and the betrayal, she had started to fall for the man who shared her bed. The man who remembered how she took her tea. The man who once stood in the rain for an hour waiting for her because she had forgotten her umbrella. Small kindnesses. Calculated, perhaps. But she had believed them. Morning light crept through the blinds. Kayamika showered, changed into the clothes Junho had left, simple black trousers, a white blouse, and found her phone on the kitchen counter. 17 missed calls. All from Siwoo. She deleted them without listening. Then a text arrived from a number she did not recognize. Don't trust Junho. He works for someone else. Get out now. Kayamika stared at the message, her heart pounding. Before she could move, the apartment door opened. But it was not Junho who entered. It was a woman. Tall, elegant, dressed in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Kayamika's entire wardrobe from Lagos. Her face was familiar. Too familiar. You're the woman from the hotel, Kayamika said slowly. 2 months ago. The one who spilled wine on my dress at the charity gala. The woman smiled. My name is Yoon Soo-yun, she said. And I've been trying to warn you about your husband for 6 months. Soo-yun sat across from Kayamika at the small kitchen table, her manicured hands wrapped around a cup of tea she had made herself. You think I'm his mistress, Soo-yun said. The woman you saw in his bed last night. Kayamika said nothing. I'm not. That woman is someone else entirely. Soo-yun's smile turned bitter. I'm something worse. I'm his cousin. And I've spent the last year trying to destroy him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Why? Kayamika finally asked. Soo-yun's eyes hardened. Because 15 years ago, Kong Si-woo killed my brother. And the family covered it up. Kayamika listened as Soo-yun unraveled a history she had never suspected. The Kong family was not merely wealthy. They were the power behind half of Seoul's construction industry, and the shadow empire that controlled what happened in the spaces no one talked about. Protection. Smuggling. Debts collected in blood. Si-woo was not just the heir. He was the enforcer. My brother discovered evidence of a deal that would have destroyed them, Soo-yun said. Shipments hidden in construction materials. People who disappeared when they asked too many questions. He threatened to expose everything. Her voice cracked. They found his body in the Han River 3 days later. And the woman in his bed? Kayamika asked. Soo-yun's expression shifted to something like pity. Her name is Min Ji-yun. She's a prosecutor. The very prosecutor assigned to investigate the Kong family's business dealings. Kayamika felt the floor tilt beneath her. He's not just cheating on you, Soo-yun said quietly. He's compromising the investigation. Seducing the woman who could put him in prison. And you, she paused. You were always just his cover. The respectable foreign wife who made him look legitimate. The next 3 weeks passed in a haze of revelation and rage. Kayamika moved from the safe house to a small apartment Soo-yun helped her secure under a false name. She stopped answering her phone entirely. She began documenting everything she remembered from her marriage. Dates, names, overheard conversations, the files she had glimpsed on Si-woo's desk when he thought she wasn't looking. She had been a lawyer before she was a wife. And she was done being invisible. But Si-woo was not a man who accepted loss. 2 weeks after she disappeared, his face appeared on every news channel in Seoul. My wife is missing, he said, his voice steady, his expression the perfect mask of concern. I am offering a reward of 500 million won for information leading to her safe return. Kayamika watched the broadcast from Soo-yun's living room, her hands shaking with fury. He's making me look like a victim, she said. He's making you look like property, Soo-yun corrected. Property he intends to reclaim. The first envelope arrived 3 days later. It was slipped under Kayamika's door with no return address, no postmark. Inside was a photograph. Her mother's house in Lagos. On the back, written in elegant Korean script, "Come home, wife. Or I will bring your family to you." Kayamika's hands trembled as she dialed a number she had not used in months. Her mother answered on the second ring. Mama, Kayamika said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I need you to leave the house. Tonight. Take Adiz and the children and go to Auntie Ngozi's place in Enugu. Kayamika, what is happening? You sound. Please, Mama. Trust me. I will explain everything. But you have to leave now. A long silence. Then her mother's voice, quiet and knowing. This man you married. He is not who he said he was, is he? Kayamaka closed her eyes.
No, Mama. He's not.
That night, Kayamaka made a decision. Running would not be enough. Hiding would not protect her family. The only way to stop Kong Siwoo was to destroy him, with the same weapons he had used to build his empire.
Information. Leverage. Truth. She needed evidence. Real evidence.
The kind that would put him behind bars and ensure he could never touch her or anyone she loved again. And she knew exactly where to find it. The Kong family compound sat on 3 acres of manicured grounds in the hills above Seoul. Kayamaka had visited twice during her marriage, both times for formal family dinners where she was displayed like a trophy and spoken to like a servant. She remembered the layout.
The main house. The guest quarters.
And the study where Siwoo's father conducted the real business of the family. The old man had died 8 months ago. The study had been locked ever since. You're insane, Soo-yeon said when Kayamaka told her the plan. I'm desperate, Kayamaka corrected. There's a difference. They sat in Soo-yeon's car, parked 2 blocks from the compound's outer wall. Dawn was still hours away.
The streets were empty.
The security system alone. I know the codes, Kayamaka said. Siwoo used the same sequence for everything. His mother's birthday. He thought I never noticed.
Soo-yeon stared at her. And if you're wrong?
Kayamaka met her gaze. Then I'll be the one who disappears into the Han River. But at least I'll have tried. The compound was quieter than she expected. Kayamaka scaled the back wall using a gardener's ladder she'd spotted during her previous visits. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she dropped into the manicured darkness of the estate. The main house loomed ahead, its windows dark. She moved along the shadows, counting her steps, remembering the path she had walked a dozen times beside the man who now hunted her. The study was in the east wing.
A separate entrance. A keypad lock.
And beyond it, every secret the Kong family had ever kept.
The code worked.
Kayamaka held her breath as the lock clicked open and the heavy oak door swung inward. The study smelled of old paper and expensive leather. Moonlight filtered through curtains that hadn't been opened in months. Dust coated every surface. She moved quickly, her lawyer's mind cataloging everything she saw. Filing cabinets. A wall safe behind a portrait. A computer that looked ancient but was probably deliberately so. She started with the filing cabinets. An hour later, she had photographed over 200 documents.
Shipping manifests. Bank transfers.
Names and dates that connected the Kong construction empire to half a dozen shell companies across Southeast Asia. And at the bottom of the last drawer, a folder marked with a single word. Jaeangi. Inside was a list of names.
15 of them.
Each one crossed out in red ink. At the bottom of the list, in Siwoo's handwriting, completed. Kayamaka's stomach turned. She knew what she was looking at.
15 people. 15 problems.
15 lives ended by the man who had once promised to protect her. She photographed the folder. Then she heard footsteps. The door to the study opened before she could hide. And standing in the doorway, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his chest tattoo visible, the serpent and lotus that she had traced with her fingers 100 times in the darkness, was Kong Siwoo.
Hello, wife, he said quietly.
His eyes moved to the folder in her hands. I was wondering when you'd finally stop running. Kayamaka did not move.
Her phone was in her pocket.
The photographs were already uploaded to a secure cloud server. Whatever happened next, the evidence would survive.
But she was trapped.
And Siwoo knew it. He stepped into the study and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock was louder than her heartbeat.
3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks of silence.
Do you know how many people I had searching for you? Do you know how many people are on that list? She shot back.
His jaw tightened.
That list is not your concern. Everything about you is my concern.
I was your wife. You are my wife.
His voice dropped, dangerous. Until I say otherwise. He moved toward her, and Kayamaka held her ground. She had spent 3 years learning the rhythms of this man. The way his anger simmered beneath the surface. The way his control only cracked in private, when no one else could see. But she had never seen him like this. There was something new in his eyes. Something almost desperate. Did you think I wanted this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Did you think I enjoyed watching you walk out that door? You had another woman in our bed. Ji-yeon means nothing to me. That's supposed to make it better? He stopped, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent that had once made her feel safe. Nothing I have done, he said slowly, has ever been about what I wanted. Kayamaka stared at him. Then what is it about?
Power? Control?
The family legacy you care about more than any human being. Siwoo's hand shot out and gripped her wrist, Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away. It's about survival, he said.
Mine. And yours. He leaned closer.
You think I married you because you were convenient? You think I kept you in that penthouse for 3 years because you were useful?
His eyes searched hers.
I married you because you were the only person in my entire life who looked at me like I might be more than what they made me. The words hit her like a blow. Kayamika felt her resolve waver, just for a second, before she rebuilt the wall around her heart.
You killed people, she said flatly.
15 names on that list.
All dead.
Siwoo released her wrist.
Yes. No denial. No excuse.
My father ordered those deaths years before I took over. I inherited the list. I inherited the consequences.
And Ji-Yun?
What did you inherit with her? He was silent for a long moment. Ji-Yun was a mistake, he finally admitted.
A miscalculation.
I thought I could control the investigation by sleeping with the prosecutor? By keeping her close.
His voice hardened.
But she's more dangerous than I realized. And she's not who she claims to be. Kayamika's mind raced.
What do you mean?
Siwoo turned away, pacing toward the window. 3 months ago, I discovered that Ji-Yun has been receiving payments from my uncle. The same uncle who has been positioning himself to take control of the syndicate since my father's death.
He faced her again.
She's not investigating me. She's working for him. And the night you found us together, he paused. She was planting evidence.
Photographs. Documents.
Things that would make you leave and never look back. Kayamika's heart stopped. She wanted me to find you.
She wanted you gone, Siwoo confirmed.
Because you were the one variable she couldn't control. The wife who might actually see through everything.
He took a step toward her.
You were never just cover, Kayamika. You were my weakness. The one thing my enemies could use against me.
His voice dropped. And they did.
She didn't want to believe him. Every instinct screamed that this was another manipulation, another layer of lies designed to pull her back into his orbit. But something in his voice rang true. The desperation she had heard earlier wasn't an act.
It was fear.
If your uncle is behind this, she said slowly, then why are you here alone?
Where are your men?
Your security. Siwoo's expression flickered. Because my uncle has spent the last 3 weeks turning them against me. Half my people think I've lost control. The other half are waiting to see who wins.
He met her eyes.
I came alone because you were the only person I could trust to tell me the truth. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had built an empire on lies now needed her honesty. Kayamika looked down at the folder in her hands.
The list of names.
The evidence of everything he had done, or at least, everything his family had ordered. She could destroy him with this. Walk out of this study, send the files to every news outlet in Seoul, and watch his world burn.
But something stopped her. Not love. Not anymore. Something darker. Curiosity. Your uncle, she said. What's his name?
Kong Dong-wook. And Ji-Yun reports to him? Directly. Kayamika's mind assembled the pieces.
Then she's not a prosecutor. She's a plant.
Someone he inserted into the investigation to gather evidence against you, real or fabricated.
Siwoo nodded.
Which means the evidence you've been collecting tonight, Kayamika continued, could destroy him too. A flash of something crossed his face. Surprise. Then, slowly, respect. You always were smarter than you let on, he murmured. Kayamika ignored the compliment. If I help you, she said, it's not because I forgive you. It's not because I trust you. And it's certainly not because I believe a single word about that woman meaning nothing. She stepped closer, her voice hardening. I help you because I want my freedom. A divorce. My family protected. And a guarantee that I walk away from this city without looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Siwoo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Done. But trust is not rebuilt in a single night. And freedom is not given, it is taken. Kayamika left the compound with the evidence she had gathered, but she did not return to Soo-Yun's apartment. Instead, she went to the one place Siwoo would never think to look. The hospital where she had once worked as a legal consultant. The place where she had first caught the attention of a man who collected people the way others collected art. Dr. Bae Eun-soo was working the night shift when Kayamika appeared at her office door. They had been friends once, before the marriage, before Kayamika's world had shrunk to the size of a penthouse prison. My God, Eun-soo whispered, rising from her desk. Everyone's been looking for you. I know. The police, the news. I know. Kayamika closed the door behind her. I need somewhere to stay. Just for a few days. Somewhere no one will find me.
Unsu studied her face. What did he do to you? Kayamaka let out a breath. It's not what he did. It's what I'm about to do to him. The next 3 days were a blur of planning. Kayamaka contacted Su-yun and shared everything she had learned, the truth about Ji-yun, the uncle's betrayal, the evidence buried in the Kong family archives. Su-yun listened in silence. When Kayamaka finished, she asked only one question. Do you believe him? Kayamaka hesitated. I believe he's afraid. And afraid men don't lie the same way confident men do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The plan took shape slowly. If Kong Dong-wook was orchestrating a takeover, he needed 2 things, evidence against Si-woo and an opportunity to present it. The annual Kong Group shareholders meeting was scheduled for the following week. 300 of Seoul's most powerful figures gathered in one room. The perfect stage for a coup. He'll expose Si-woo publicly, Kayamaka said. Use Ji-yun's testimony, the planted evidence, everything. And once the shareholders turn against him, the syndicate's business will follow. Su-yun frowned. So we expose Dong-wook first. We expose them both. Kayamaka's voice was cold. Let the entire Kong Empire eat itself alive. And then I walk away. With everything I need to start over. But the night before the shareholders meeting, everything changed. Kayamaka's phone buzzed at 3 in the morning. A text from an unknown number. He knows where you are. Run now. She didn't stop to question it. She grabbed her bag, the files, and slipped out of the hospital through a service entrance. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Voices. And then, unmistakably, Si-woo's command cutting through the darkness. Find her. Whatever it takes. Kayamaka ran. Through back alleys, across rain-slick streets, past neon signs that blurred into streaks of color. She didn't know if he was chasing her to protect her or capture her. And she was done waiting to find out. An hour later, she stood at the entrance to a building she had never visited but knew well from Su-yun's descriptions. The headquarters of the National Prosecution Service. If the evidence was going to bring down the Kong Empire, it needed to be in the right hands. And Kayamaka was done trusting anyone but herself. She was halfway up the steps when a car pulled to the curb behind her. The door opened. Ji-yun stepped out. And behind her, walking slowly through the rain like a man who had all the time in the world, was Kong Dong-wook. I had a feeling you'd come here, Ji-yun said, her smile cold. The righteous lawyer seeking justice. Dong-wook stopped beside her. Hand over the files, he said. And we'll pretend this never happened. Kayamaka's grip tightened on her bag. You killed 15 people. Destroyed families. Built an empire on blood. Her voice shook with fury. And you think I'll just hand you the evidence? Dong-wook's expression didn't change. I think you'll do whatever keeps your mother alive. The threat landed like a physical blow. Kayamaka's breath caught. What did you say? Your family relocated to Enugu 3 weeks ago, Dong-wook said calmly. Your mother's health has been declining. Stress, the doctors say. But we both know stress can be managed. He smiled. Or accelerated. Kayamaka felt the ground shift beneath her. Everything she had done, every risk, every sleepless night, had been to protect her family. And they had been watching the whole time. If you hurt them. I don't want to hurt anyone. Dong-wook spread his hands. I want to take back what my brother stole from me. The empire he built with my father's money. The empire he denied me when he made his idiot son the heir. His eyes hardened. Give me the files. I'll destroy Si-woo. And you'll walk away with your family intact. It was an impossible choice. Justice or family. Truth or survival. Kayamaka stood frozen on the prosecution service steps, rain soaking through her coat, the evidence of 2 generations of corruption clutched in her hands. She thought of her mother's voice on the phone. This man you married. He is not who he said he was. No. He wasn't. But neither was she. She made her decision. I'll give you the files, she said. Dong-wook's smile widened. On one condition. The smile faltered. I want proof that my family is safe. Video confirmation. Tonight. Dong-wook exchanged a glance with Ji-yun. That can be arranged. Then arrange it. I'll wait here. 20 minutes later, Ji-yun's phone buzzed. A video call. Kayamaka watched as her mother's face appeared on the screen, tired, worried, but alive. Behind her, the familiar walls of Auntie Ngozi's sitting room. Mama, Kayamaka said softly. Are you safe? We are safe. But Kayamaka, what is happening? These men. I know, Mama. I know. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Her mother's eyes glistened. Always. The call ended. Kayamika turned to Dongwook. "The files," she said. And then she did something neither of them expected. She threw the bag, not to Dongwook, but over the railing of the prosecution service steps, where it landed at the feet of a man who had just stepped out of the shadows. Kong Si-woo caught it without blinking. The next 30 seconds unfolded in chaos. Men emerged from parked cars, Si-woo's men, the ones who had remained loyal. Dongwook shouted orders. Ji-yun reached for a weapon that was no longer there, confiscated by the two officers who now flanked her. And through it all, Kayamika stood motionless, watching the empire she had married into tear itself apart. When the shouting stopped and the handcuffs clicked, Si-woo walked up the steps to where she waited. His face was unreadable. The tattoo on his chest gleamed in the streetlight, the serpent and lotus, symbols of power and rebirth. "You knew," he said quietly. "I suspected." Her voice was steady. "Dongwook's people contacted me the night I found you with Ji-yun. They wanted me to be their weapon. So I let them think I was. And the files. Copies. The originals are already with the prosecutor general. The real one." Si-woo stared at her. For the first time since she had known him, he looked completely off balance. "You destroyed my uncle," he said slowly. "And you handed me the evidence to clear my name." "I handed the evidence to the authorities," she corrected. "What they do with it is their choice." "But why?" She met his eyes. "Because I wanted my freedom. Not your gratitude. Not your protection. Just the ability to walk away and never look back." A long silence fell between them. The rain had stopped. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. "And if I don't let you walk away?" Si-woo asked. Kayamika smiled, the first genuine smile she had allowed herself in months. "Then you'll prove that everything I believed about you was true. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure the world knows it." He didn't move. Didn't reach for her. Didn't try to stop her. He simply watched as she turned and walked down the steps, her heels clicking against wet concrete, her head held high. "Kayamika." She paused. "I never stopped. Don't." Her voice cracked, just once. "Don't say something we'll both regret." She kept walking. She was almost at the corner when she heard his voice again. Quieter this time. Almost lost in the wind. "I'll wait." She didn't turn around. But something in her chest, something she had thought was dead, flickered back to life. 3 months later. Lagos hummed with the familiar chaos. Kayamika had missed more than she ever admitted. The heat. The traffic. The sound of her mother's voice calling her inside for dinner. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece. A position at a law firm that didn't ask too many questions, a small apartment overlooking the lagoon, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had survived. But survival wasn't the same as peace. And peace wasn't the same as forgetting. She was reading contracts when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Distinctive. Familiar. Her heart stopped. She opened the door. And there he stood. Kong Si-woo, in a linen shirt and dark trousers, looking like he had stepped out of a dream she kept trying not to have. The tattoo was visible at his open collar. The same serpent and lotus. The same man. And yet somehow, not the same at all. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I told you I would wait." "That was 3 months ago." "I'm aware." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Patience has never been my strength." She stared at him. "The syndicate. Dismantled. The legal holdings have been restructured. My uncle is awaiting trial." He paused. "I'm not the man you married anymore, Kayamika." "Then who are you?" He took a breath. "Someone who wants to earn back what he destroyed. If you'll let him." She should have closed the door. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that trusting him again would only lead to more heartbreak, more betrayal, more nights spent rebuilding walls that he had shattered. But she had learned something in those 3 months. Walls kept out pain. But they also kept out everything else. "One dinner," she said finally. His eyes lit up. "That's all I'm asking. It's not forgiveness." "I know. And it doesn't mean." "I know." He reached out slowly and took her hand. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so gentle it made her throat tighten. "It means you're giving me a chance to show you who I could be, instead of who I was." She looked at their joined hands. At the tattoo on his wrist, a smaller version of the one on his chest, a mark she had never noticed before. And she realized, with sudden clarity, that he had added something to it. A single word, inked beneath the serpent and lotus. Her name. "When did you get that?" she whispered. "The day after you left." His voice was rough. "I needed something to remind me what I was fighting for." She looked up at him. At the man who had built an empire on blood.
At the man who had destroyed it for her. At the man who stood on her doorstep in Lagos, 3 months later, with her name etched into his skin. And for the first time in 3 years, Kayamaka Ease allowed herself to hope. The restaurant Siwoo chose was small and unremarkable, a local spot near the lagoon where the owner knew everyone by name and the food tasted like home. Kayamaka had passed it 100 times without stopping. She had never imagined sitting across from Kong Siwoo at one of its battered wooden tables, watching him struggle with a plate of jollof rice while the evening breeze carried the sound of boats across the water.
"You're holding the spoon wrong," she said. He looked up, startled. "Am I?"
"This isn't Seoul. We eat with our hands here." She demonstrated, scooping rice into her palm with practiced ease.
"Like this."
He stared at her for a moment. Then slowly, he set down his utensils and copied her technique.
"Better?" he asked. "Worse?"
"But at least you're trying." Dinner lasted 3 hours. They talked about everything and nothing. Her work at the law firm, the weather in Lagos, the way the city had changed since she left. They did not talk about Seoul. They did not talk about the marriage. They did not talk about the woman in their bed or the list of names or the night she ran through rain-soaked streets while his men hunted her. Some truths needed to wait. When the check came, Kayamaka reached for it. Siwoo caught her wrist.
"Let me.
"I can pay for my own dinner."
I know you can."
His eyes met hers. "But I'm asking you to let me do this. Not because I owe you. Because I want to."
She hesitated. Then slowly, she withdrew her hand.
"One dinner doesn't erase anything."
"I know."
"It doesn't mean I trust you." "I know that too." He held her gaze.
"But it's a start, isn't it?"
He walked her home through streets that smelled of rain and exhaust and roasting meat from the vendors who never seemed to sleep. At her door, they stood in silence for a long moment. "I'm staying at the Eco Hotel," he said. "Room 412.
"If you want to talk. Or if you don't. I'll be there." "How long?"
"As long as it takes." She studied his face in the dim light. "What if it takes years?" "Then I'll be here for years." "What if I never forgive you?"
He was quiet for a moment.
"Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn something I may never deserve."
His voice dropped. "But I won't stop."
"Not until you tell me to." She did not invite him in. But she did not tell him to stop. And as she watched him walk away into the Lagos night, Kayamaka realized that something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first fragile threads of something that might someday grow into trust. The weeks that followed became a strange kind of courtship. Siwoo did not push. He did not demand. He simply showed up. At her office with coffee. At the law firm's community events with quiet donations that bore no name. At the doorstep of her mother's house with traditional Korean gifts that made her mother cluck with suspicious approval. "He is persistent, this one," her mother observed one evening. "He destroyed our life, Mama. And now he is trying to rebuild it." Her mother's eyes were knowing. "The question is whether you will let him." Kayamaka did not have an answer. Not yet. But the past was not finished with them. 1 month after Siwoo's arrival in Lagos, a letter appeared at Kayamaka's office. No return address. No postmark. Inside was a photograph. Siwoo and Ji-yun, standing together outside a courthouse in Seoul. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. Kayamaka's blood turned to ice. He had been in Seoul. He had been with her. And he had said nothing. She confronted him that evening at his hotel. The photograph was crumpled in her fist. "Explain this." Siwoo looked at the image, and something dark crossed his face. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter." "Explain." He took a slow breath. "Ji-yun is testifying against my uncle. She agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. I was there to finalize the terms of her deal." "And you didn't think to tell me you were going back to Seoul? To meet with her?" "I was going to tell you tonight. After the fact. Because I knew how it would look." His voice was strained. "And I knew you would assume the worst." Kayamaka felt the familiar walls rising around her heart. "Someone sent me this photograph deliberately," she said slowly. "Someone who wanted me to see you with her." Siwoo's expression sharpened. "Who?" "I don't know." There was no return address. He reached for his phone. "I need to make a call. You need to explain why I should believe a single word you say." He stopped. Met her eyes. "Because I have spent the last month proving to you that I am not the man I was. Because I came to Lagos with nothing but hope and the clothes on my back. Because," his voice cracked, "because I love you, Kayamaka. And I have never said those words to anyone in my entire life." The confession hung between them.
Raw. Terrifying. Real. Kayamika's hand loosened on the photograph. Someone is trying to tear us apart, she said quietly. Then we don't let them. How? He stepped closer. Together. The way we should have done from the beginning. That night, they sat side by side on the hotel balcony, watching the lights of Lagos flicker below. Siwoo's phone sat between them, a list of possible suspects glowing on the screen. The photograph was recent, Kayamika said. Which means whoever sent it had access to the courthouse. Someone inside the prosecution. Or someone who paid for access. Your uncle is in custody. But his network isn't. Siwoo's jaw tightened. Dongwook may have lost his freedom, but he hasn't lost his reach. The thought sent a chill down her spine. If he's still trying to destroy you. He's trying to destroy us. Siwoo turned to face her. The photograph wasn't sent to hurt me. It was sent to make you doubt me. To drive you away again. He reached out and took her hand. Don't let him win. Kayamika looked at their joined fingers. At the tattoo on his wrist. At her name, inked into his skin like a promise. I need time, she said. I know. And I need proof. Real proof that I can trust you. He nodded. What do you need? She met his eyes. Access to everything. Your finances. Your communications. The details of every meeting you've had since you left Seoul. He didn't hesitate. Done. The files arrived the next morning. 3 years of records. Bank statements. Emails. Phone logs. Kayamika spent 2 weeks reviewing them. What she found was not what she expected. There were no secrets. No hidden payments. No evidence of anything except a man who had systematically dismantled the empire he was born to inherit. Charitable donations to organizations she had mentioned casually in conversation. Investments in Nigerian businesses she had once said deserved more attention. Transfers to a medical fund in Enugu, where her mother's healthcare had mysteriously become free. And at the bottom of the files, a document she almost missed. A signed agreement, dated 2 years ago. A legal commitment to transfer full ownership of the Kong family's legitimate holdings to a trust in her name, in the event of his death. She stared at the document for a long time. He had been planning for her future before she even knew she wanted one without him. She found him at the hotel, sitting on the balcony where they had talked that night. You were going to give me everything, she said. He looked up. I still am. If you want it. Why? Because you deserve it. He stood, facing her. Because the only thing I've ever done right was marrying you. And I spent 3 years not realizing it. That's not an answer. Then here's the truth. He stepped closer. I don't deserve you. I never did. But I spent every day since you left trying to become the man who might. And if that means signing over everything I own to prove it, then that's what I'll do. Kayamika felt the last wall crumble. Not because of the money. Not because of the gesture. Because she finally saw what she had been too afraid to believe. He had changed. Really, truly changed. And he had done it for her. She closed the distance between them. Her hands found his chest. The tattoo pulsed beneath her fingertips. One condition, she whispered. Anything. You stay. Here. In Lagos. With me. He let out a breath. For how long? She looked up at him. Forever. The kiss that followed was nothing like their first. No desperation. No power imbalance. No calculation. Just two people who had found their way back to each other through fire and rain and 3,000 miles of doubt. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting over the lagoon. Siwoo's forehead rested against hers. I love you, he said again. I know. Is that your answer? She smiled. No. She pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. This is. And she kissed him again. But some stories do not end with a kiss. And some enemies do not stay buried. 2 weeks later. Kayamika was working late at the law firm when her phone buzzed. A video call from an unknown number. She answered without thinking. And froze. On the screen was a face she had hoped never to see again. Kong Dongwook. He was sitting in what looked like a prison visiting room, his hands folded calmly on the table. Hello, niece-in-law, he said. We need to talk. Kayamika's grip tightened on the phone. You're in custody. You have no power. Power doesn't require freedom. His smile was cold. I have associates who will do anything I ask. And what I'm asking for now is very simple. What? My nephew destroyed my empire. You helped him do it. He leaned closer to the camera. Now I want compensation. You'll get nothing from me. I want him to suffer.
Dong-wook's eyes glittered. And you're going to help me make that happen.
Go to hell. His smile widened.
Check your messages.
The call ended.
Kayamika's hands were shaking as she opened her text messages.
A video. She pressed play. And her world collapsed.
On the screen was her sister, Adiz, bound to a chair in a room Kayamika didn't recognize. A man stood behind her, his face obscured, a knife gleaming in his hand. You have 48 hours, Dong-wook's voice said over the footage. Bring Si-woo to the address I send.
Alone. Or your sister dies. The screen went black.
Kayamika couldn't breathe.
She couldn't think. Her sister. Her baby sister.
The girl she had protected since childhood, sacrificed everything for, left behind in Lagos to build a life that would make them all safe.
Now a hostage. Because of her. She called Si-woo.
He answered on the first ring. What's wrong?
They have Adiz. Silence. Then his voice, hard as steel.
I'm on my way. Si-woo arrived at Kayamika's apartment within the hour. He found her pacing the small living room, her phone clutched in her hand, her eyes wild with a fear she could not control.
Show me, he said.
She handed him the device. He watched the video without expression.
His jaw tightened.
His hands did not shake. But Kayamika knew him well enough to see the storm building behind his eyes. When did this arrive? 20 minutes ago.
And the address?
She pulled up the text that had followed the video.
A set of coordinates. Nothing more.
Si-woo studied them for a long moment. This is Dong-wook's final play, he said quietly. He knows he's finished. The trial starts in 2 weeks. This is his last chance to hurt me. Through my sister. Through you. His eyes met hers. He knows what you mean to me now. And he's using it. Kayamika's voice cracked. If anything happens to Adiz, nothing will happen to her. Si-woo's voice was steady, absolute. I promise you.
How can you promise that?
You don't even know where she is. I know my uncle. He reached out and gripped her shoulders. He's arrogant. He thinks he's already won. And that arrogance is going to be his downfall. What do? We don't play his game. Si-woo's expression hardened. We change the rules. The next 12 hours were a blur of phone calls and strategy. Si-woo contacted the remnants of his network, the men who had stayed loyal, the investigators who owed him favors, the former prosecutors who had helped bring down his uncle's empire. Kayamika reached out to Soo-yeon, who was still in Seoul, still gathering evidence for the trial. Together, they began to piece together Dong-wook's operation. The coordinates point to a warehouse district outside Ikeja, Soo-yeon reported over video call.
Industrial area. Mostly abandoned. Easy to hide someone.
And Dong-wook's associates?
Si-woo asked. 3 confirmed.
2 former syndicate enforcers who avoided prosecution.
And a woman.
Kayamika's stomach dropped.
Who? Soo-yeon hesitated. Min Ji-yeon.
The name hit like a blow. She's supposed to be in custody, Kayamika said. She agreed to cooperate. She was released 2 days ago. Bail was set at an amount that should have been impossible. Soo-yeon's expression was grim.
Someone paid it.
Si-woo's eyes went cold. My uncle has been planning this for weeks. He used the trial preparation as cover. Made us think Ji-yeon was cooperating while she was already planning to disappear. And now she's here.
In Lagos. He nodded slowly.
With my sister. The plan they developed was dangerous. But it was the only chance they had. Si-woo would go to the coordinates as demanded, but not alone. Former military operatives he had worked with during the syndicate's dissolution would be positioned around the warehouse. Nigerian police, contacted through a connection of Kayamika's from her law firm, would be on standby. And Kayamika would be watching from a surveillance van 2 blocks away. You're not going in there, Si-woo said when she protested. She's my sister. And you're the reason I'm still fighting. He took her face in his hands. If something happens to you, none of this matters.
None of it.
She wanted to argue. But she saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear he had been hiding since the moment he arrived.
Promise me you'll come back, she whispered. I promise. The warehouse. 11:47 at night.
Si-woo approached the rusted metal doors alone, his hands visible at his sides. The night air was thick with humidity and the distant hum of generators. He had worn the linen shirt deliberately, the one that showed the tattoo on his chest. The serpent and lotus. Kayamika's name on his wrist. If this was his last night alive, he wanted to die wearing her mark. The doors opened. Ji-yeon stood in the threshold, a gun held loosely at her side. Hello, Siwoo. Her smile was bitter. I was wondering if you'd actually come. Where is she?
Inside. Alive. For now. He stepped forward.
Ji-yun raised the weapon.
Not so fast. First we talk.
She led him through the warehouse, past crates and shadows and the distant drip of water from a damaged roof. In the center of the space, lit by a single hanging bulb, sat Adiz.
Bound. Gagged. Terrified. But alive.
Siwoo felt his heart unclench by a fraction.
Let her go, he said.
This is between me and Dongwook. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it. Ji-yun circled around him. Your uncle wanted to destroy you through the woman you love. But Kayamaka is too well protected now.
Too visible.
So we took the next best thing. And what does he want in return?
Ji-yun stopped. Your confession. On camera.
Every crime you've ever committed. Every death you've ordered. Everything. That would put me in prison for the rest of my life.
That's the point. Siwoo looked at Adiz.
At the fear in her eyes. At the way her body trembled against the ropes.
Then he looked at Ji-yun. Fine.
Her eyebrows rose.
Fine.
I'll give you the confession.
Release her first.
Not how this works. Then it doesn't work at all.
His voice hardened.
You want me to destroy myself on camera? I need to know she's safe. Otherwise, I have no reason to cooperate. Ji-yun studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone.
Bring the car around.
We're making the exchange outside. The next 5 minutes stretched into eternity. Adiz was lifted from the chair, her bonds loosened enough that she could walk, and led toward the warehouse doors. Siwoo followed, his eyes never leaving her. At the threshold, Ji-yun stopped.
The confession first. Release her first. A standoff.
And then, from somewhere in the darkness, a shot rang out.
Chaos erupted. Ji-yun dove for cover.
The enforcers scattered. Siwoo grabbed Adiz and threw them both behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the warehouse.
Stay down, he ordered.
She nodded, too terrified to speak. He pulled a knife from his boot, the one piece of insurance he had allowed himself, and moved toward the source of the gunfire. The operatives had moved in early. Something had triggered their advance, a signal Siwoo didn't recognize. But he wasn't going to question it. The next 3 minutes were violence and shadow. Bodies moving through darkness. The crack of weapons. The thud of men falling. When the shooting stopped, Siwoo stood over Ji-yun's crumpled form. She was alive. Barely.
A wound in her shoulder.
You should have stayed in Seoul, he said quietly. Her laugh was wet, pained. Your uncle will destroy you. Even from prison. Even if it takes years. Let him try. The police arrived 7 minutes later. Adiz was rushed to a medical van, shock blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a paramedic checking her vitals. Kayamaka burst from the surveillance van and ran to her sister, pulling her into an embrace so tight that neither of them could breathe. I'm sorry, Kayamaka sobbed. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Adiz's voice was hoarse but steady. It's never been your fault. Behind them, Siwoo stood alone in the warehouse doorway, watching the sisters reunite. His hands were shaking. But he did not let anyone see. The days that followed were a blur of statements and medical checks and conversations with officials who needed explanations. Ji-yun was taken into custody, this time with no possibility of bail. The two enforcers were identified as wanted criminals in 3 countries. And Kong Dongwook, isolated in his Seoul prison cell, received word that his final gambit had failed. Reports said he did not speak for 3 days afterward. Kayamaka did not leave Adiz's side for a week. They stayed at their mother's house in Lagos, surrounded by family, surrounded by love. And every evening, without fail, Siwoo arrived at the door. He did not ask to be let in. He simply waited. Until Kayamaka came out to meet him. You saved her, she said one night, standing on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. We saved her. He reached for her hand. Together. You could have died in that warehouse. I almost did. Why? Her voice cracked. Why risk everything for someone you barely know? He was quiet for a moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips. Because she's part of you, he said simply. And everything that's part of you matters to me. The kiss that followed was different from all the others. Deeper. More certain. A promise sealed beneath the Lagos stars. 1 month later. The courtroom in Seoul was packed. Journalists, dignitaries, and members of Korea's most powerful families had gathered to witness the trial of Kong Dongwook, the man who had tried to destroy an empire and failed. Kayamaka sat in the front row, her hand in Siwoo's. She had not planned to be here. But some endings needed to be witnessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records. Testimony from Ji Yun, who had chosen cooperation over decades in prison. Documents that traced Dongwook's schemes back 15 years. And at the center of it all, the list.
15 names.
15 deaths ordered by a man who believed power was worth any price. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Kayamika felt something release inside her.
Not joy. Not triumph. Just relief.
The man who had threatened her family, hunted her across continents, and tried to destroy everything she loved would never hurt anyone again. After the verdict, Si-woo led her through the crowd to a private room at the back of the courthouse. "There's one more thing," he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Kayamika's breath caught.
Si-woo.
"This isn't a proposal," he said quickly.
Not yet.
"Not until you're ready."
He opened the box.
Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light like a trapped star.
"This is a promise," he said.
"That whenever you're ready, whether it's tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, I'll be waiting." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're impossible."
"I know.
"You're arrogant and stubborn and you never listen."
Also true."
"And I love you."
He went still.
"What did you say?" She took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. "I said I love you."
She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "And I'm ready."
The kiss that followed drew scattered applause from the handful of people who had followed them out of the courtroom. Neither of them cared.
6 months later.
The wedding was held in Lagos. Not in a cathedral or a grand ballroom, but in the garden of Kayamika's mother's house, beneath a canopy of white flowers and flickering lanterns. 300 guests had been invited. Only the ones who truly mattered attended. Kayamika wore white, a dress designed by a Nigerian designer she had loved since childhood, with traditional patterns woven into the fabric. Si-woo wore black, a suit cut to perfection, with a single lotus flower pinned to his lapel. The tattoo on his chest was visible beneath the open collar of his shirt. The serpent and lotus. Her name on his wrist. The ceremony was short. The vows were long. Kayamika spoke of resilience, of survival, of learning to trust again after trust had been shattered. Si-woo spoke of redemption, of becoming worthy of something he had never expected to find. And when the officiant asked if they would take each other, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, they both said yes before he finished the question. The reception lasted until dawn. Music. Dancing. Food prepared by Kayamika's aunties, who had spent 3 days in the kitchen and refused all offers of help. At some point, Si-woo's mother arrived, a woman Kayamika had only met once, who had disapproved of the marriage from the beginning. She watched them dance. And when the song ended, she approached. "You make him happy," she said stiffly. "I did not expect that." "Neither did I," Kayamika admitted.
A long pause.
"Perhaps I was wrong about you." It was not an apology.
But it was a start.
As the sun rose over Lagos, Si-woo and Kayamika stood on the balcony of the hotel suite they would share that night. Below them, the city was waking up.
Horns. Voices.
The eternal, chaotic symphony of home. "Thank you," Si-woo said quietly.
For what?
"For not giving up on me."
He turned to face her.
"For seeing the man I could be when all I showed you was the man I was." She reached up and touched his face.
You earned it. Every day. Every gesture.
Every moment you chose to stay. "I'll keep choosing." His voice was rough. "For the rest of my life."
Good. She smiled.
"Because I'm not letting you go." The kiss that followed was soft.
Unhurried.
The beginning of forever.
1 year later.
Kayamika stood in the doorway of their new home, a house on the outskirts of Lagos, with a garden where her mother could plant vegetables and a study where Si-woo could work without the constant hum of the city. He had given up the empire entirely. The construction holdings had been sold to a consortium that promised to run them legally. The money had been divided among charities, former employees, and the families of those who had suffered under the syndicate's rule. What remained was enough to live comfortably.
More than enough.
"You're thinking too loud," Si-woo said, appearing behind her. "I'm thinking about how different this is. From everything I expected. Different good."
She turned to face him.
Different perfect.
He pulled her close.
His hand rested on her stomach, on the slight swell that had appeared over the past month. Neither of them had planned it. Both of them were terrified. And both of them were happier than they had ever been. "Our child will have everything we didn't," Si-woo said quietly.
Safety. Love.
A home where they never have to be afraid.
Kayamika nodded.
And they'll know where they come from.
Both sides.
The strength of your people and the resilience of mine. Korean and Nigerian. The best of both worlds.
He kissed her forehead.
I like the sound of that. Epilogue, 5 years later. The little girl had her father's eyes and her mother's smile. She ran through the garden, chasing butterflies and laughing at nothing, while her grandmother watched from a chair beneath a mango tree. Kayamaka and Siwoo stood on the porch, his arm around her waist, watching their daughter discover the world. Do you ever think about Seoul?
Kayamaka asked. Sometimes.
Do you miss it? He considered the question. I miss the person I could have been if I'd grown up somewhere else. But I don't miss the person I was. He turned to look at her. That person would never have found you. So no regrets?
Only one. He smiled.
That I didn't meet you sooner. Their daughter ran back to them, holding a flower she had picked from the garden. For you, Mama, she said, pressing it into Kayamaka's hand.
Thank you, baby.
And for Daddy, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a smooth stone. I found this. It looks like a heart. Siwoo knelt down to accept it, his expression softening. It's perfect. Like our family? He glanced up at Kayamaka. Like our family. That evening, after dinner and bedtime stories and whispered goodnights, Siwoo and Kayamaka sat together on the porch. The stars were out. The garden was quiet. And somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with the same chaotic energy it had carried since the day Kayamaka was born.
Thank you, she said. For what? For staying. For fighting.
For becoming the man I always hoped you could be.
He took her hand.
Thank you for believing I could. They sat in silence for a long time. Two people who had been broken by circumstance. Two people who had rebuilt themselves and each other. Two people who had found love in the most unlikely of places, and refused to let it go. The past would always be there. The scars. The memories. The weight of everything they had survived. But the future was theirs. And they would face it together. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you enjoyed this Afro-Korean dark romance, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment the location where you are watching from. And don't forget to hit the bell for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay safe, stay loved, and never give up on your happily ever after.